and welcome to Grace's podcast. Here today we are interviewing my mother, Susan. She has written a book, actually a couple of books you have, eh? You've written a couple of books or have a couple of books along the way?
Yeah, it's one book, but we decided to break it up into small parts so that we can release it and polish it as we go, so it's not too overwhelming. Yeah.
So what's your book? I know what your book is about, but for the readers, for the watchers at home, explain a little bit about your book.
Okay, it's a book set in New Zealand, but no particular place in New Zealand, like a fictional, maybe even parallel universe New Zealand.
Like an alternate universe. I like that.
Yeah, it's basically a Cinderella, Anna Green Gables kind of story, but with a little Pakeha girl. That's the New Zealand term for a pale-faced person. It's not a derogatory term. A little Pakeha girl that gets adopted by a Māori village. So you get to sort of see the world from what it might be like to live in a Māori village. Yeah.
And is this a bit of like a hopeful kind of universe for what might be in the future, or it might be like a alternate reality? You said it was alternate reality, but like
yeah. So as you and I know, but people overseas might not know, in New Zealand we're entering a post-Treaty of Waitangi time. So I'm just imagining what that might have looked like, and maybe even what it might have looked like if we hadn't had so many hiccups in our history between our two cultures. So it's sort of a bit of just a
bit of wistful thinking, you might say.
Yeah. and possibly it could come true. So not my exact story, but a New Zealand, a future of a positive New Zealand. I think New Zealand's a positive country, and I think it will have a positive future.
Well, I wanted to know, are some of your characters inspired from real life, like Tiwa or the chief or that kind of thing?
Not exactly like a particular person, but definitely there's a familiarity to the characters that is probably based on people I know. Like, I don't particularly think of anyone. I did probably base my main character on you, but not you in particular, but she has graciness about her. So because I know you, and so it's always good to work with what you know and then build that into your imagination and creativity.
Well, that's good to know. And it's a bit of a like, I'll take a bit of this and take a bit of that, make a new character from that. Yeah, excellent. Well, what's your writing process like?
Okay, so my initial story for this story came to me. I was just sitting in the Polynesian hot pools in Rotorua. I'm trying to say that correctly. Rotorua. And it was I was just sitting and pondering about things, and came up with the initial story because it's a bit of a challenge trying to write a New Zealand story, because we're so used to seeing stories set in America or England, or some in Australia. I have read some stories in Australia, which I've enjoyed. But we're used, I feel like I know Times Square. I've never been to New York, but that's probably more from movies. But these sorts of things are repetitive, but we don't get that a lot in New Zealand. So
Yes, well, it is quite refreshing to read a story that's about a place that, even though your story, the place where they live, it isn't exactly real, it still feels like it's my home. And that was cool to find.
I haven't been able to put actual New Zealand names in, because the way iwi, that's Māori for tribe. Māori is the indigenous people of New Zealand. So the way iwi work is they are usually geographically based. So if you say a name of an area, you might as well just name an iwi, a particular tribe. So
it can get complicated.
So that's why I don't. And I don't even name the capital city even though it's probably Wellington. The way I describe it is probably Wellington. But, you know, in our short history of New Zealand, we've had 3 capital cities, and it's kind of cool to think about any one of those, Bay of Islands or Auckland or Wellington, you know, that they could have all been 3 different storylines for where our capital city and how we based the growth and structure around our country could have grown out of that. So so I think that's kind of cool too, that you don't get stuck particularly with even the names of the places of our country.
When I read your book, it feels kind of it feels very dreamy, almost Studio Ghibli kind of dreamy. Like I'm sure there's conflicts and that kind of thing, but you feel like you are in the story. Like with Anne and Green Gables, you feel like you are in the universe and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of quite a peaceful place, even though there's sort of undercurrents of trouble. It's generally, to start with, at least a very wholesome kind of adventure. There's something you said just before that I wanted to talk about. Oh, when you were mentioning Studio Ghibli, so I might be in like chapter 2, like the second sort of part of the first story. I describe the marae complex, and so those initial buildings, the marae complex and the wharanui and the wharikai, that's pretty particular, as you and I both know. When you go to any marae in New Zealand, you usually see those things laid out slightly differently, but that's in common to every marae. But the village behind it, I did base that. I lived in Japan for 2 years, and we often went to temples and shrines, and shrines are like little villages. So I did sort of marry that, and you know, Māori culture did sit on the floor and sleep on the floor and all those things. So there is some similarity. So I just did so if you thought Studio Ghibli when you started to get into the village, it's very much influenced by that. So yeah, or the temples and shrines that I went to.
Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't know that when you told me, when I got the feeling from it, but the fact that you just told me now, that was quite cool. What advice would you give to people who also want to write a book?
Just start doing it. Don't think that you can't, or that that's for someone else to do. It's actually for you to do. Writing is a good thing for everyone, and you know, you're only competing with yourself. In saying that, lots of people will enjoy other people's books. Readers love reading, you know, good readers love reading. So so there will be people that will enjoy your book, but you're writing initially for yourself, or maybe you're writing for a friend or someone. Like, it's really good to have someone in mind that you're writing for, so that you can put in things that they would enjoy, or that lead them on an adventure that you'd like to take them on. And so I think of you when I write, because you and I read together so much. I love it when you read to me and you put those really cool voices in. But, you know, we often sort of fangirl over the same sort of parts of stories. Like, oh, that's so cool. We seem to be tense about the same things. And so because I know you so well, and I know you're reading, I know what we both like, that makes it easier to write, because I'm just writing for us, and then other people like it. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. We've already achieved the goal and just suiting ourselves, suiting you and me, you know, so that's really cool.
I like what you said about that, because when the fact that you said you're just writing for you and me, of course you're thinking about other people, you're not really thinking about the other people, you're basing it just the two of us. Because when I write my stories, I'm thinking about you, Calvin, and me, and a little bit of what Dad might like, and that kind of thing, and Nick, a big
and some of your friends. I agree, and we know what we all enjoy, so you don't have to suit everyone. No, just what a few
write what you want to write.
People.
I heard there's a saying that some people say, that write what you want to read. Is that kind of what you mean here?
And that has been really helpful for me. I really love reading my story. And so, you know, I don't get writer's block, because if I want to write, but I haven't got anything that I'm working on, I need to get back to my process, don't I? But when I'm writing, I want to write, but I can't quite think of something. If I read what I've already written or what I've writing for the future or whatever, then I'll come up with ideas. It's so your own story sparks on your own ideas. So sorry, getting back to my process, I do think of things and then I write them down. So once I got that initial story, I guess it's a little overview. I know that I'm going to do the whole of this particular character, my main character, Catherine Taylor's life. I'm hoping to do all of her life, not in detail, but bits and pieces, which is very Anne of Green Gables. You can do the whole span of her life. And I've read other really cool series over not just the lives of one character, but over the whole lifespans of a few different family, like one family, but a few different family members in generations. So I've really enjoyed those sorts of things. 100 Years of Solitude is like that, and the Jeffrey Archer Clifton series are like that, and even some of the sci-fi I've read have been.
Some of the Cherub might be like that as well.
Yeah. There's generations. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, and I like that. So then I just think about things like when I'm doing my housework or walking the dog, and then you already thought it through, and you and I both have good memories, so we can think about things and not panic that we need to write it down quickly. I know that if I think about something, I can then come in and write it down. So that's how it works. And I'm usually writing it down when I'm waiting for you guys at something that I've dropped you off for. So that's how it works. Yeah. So I'm not wasting time.
No, of course not. I also know that you don't write in chronological order. You write when the idea hits and you write it down. Then you fill in the spaces if you need to, and you get your own ideas.
Yeah.
And I find that quite intriguing, because with me, I can't, my mind won't let me do that because I feel like I've got to do it in order. But it's really interesting to hear how you managed to not, it's really cool because you can just write it down and then just get the ideas and just keep going. So I reckon that's probably why you don't really get writer's block. The writer's block is also like a do you believe in writer's block kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. You don't, if you make it a thing, then you'll get stuck by it. But if you just think, oh, I just can't think of anything particular to write about, then you don't feel stressed, and you just will then look at something and then add to it. That's the thing. If you write in chronological order, that's okay, and it's a good way to probably start. But if you jump back, then your earlier character can allude to some future things that you know about, but your audience doesn't, and that makes it like layered, like much more
in depth.
Yeah, and your character becomes a lot less two-dimensional because there's little bits and weaves and hints. That means that there's a lot more to the character than the audience has discovered. Yeah.
So that's really cool. I might take your advice, actually, because I do get stuck on my own books. And maybe when I get stuck on my own books, I should actually all right, I'll write the future chapters.
Go back, pad out some bits. Yeah. Or jump forward.
I always get stuck on the beginning. Beginning is the hardest for me, but the rest of the book, I'm easy breezy. It's just getting to the actual, yeah.
I think some authors start with the end. I've heard of that. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I can't name an author that does that, but that would help, because if you knew where you're going, I start with where everything changes. And someone that was doing a writing workshop, or I can't remember who it was,
Joseph?
but someone said that to me, start where everything changes. It might have even been Rollins. I can't remember. Or it might have been Roald Dahl. But when you're writing a story, if you start where everything changes for the character, then that's quite an interesting place to start. I think it gets your audience hooked quite quickly. Yeah.
Well, that's cool to know. Well, actually, the thing about starting at the end, when I wrote my Deborah play, I actually started at the end and then went backwards.
Perfect. Yes. See, yeah.
And it actually worked really well. So I just don't know why I should actually put that in execution and actually try it with my normal stories. So yeah.
Yeah, because you're free to do that. The audience definitely has to go with it, whichever direction you put the story, but you don't. Yeah.
Do you do any research for your books or anything like that, or is it kind of just?
Yeah. Well, I've got a Māori translation dictionary on my phone, and I usually have my phone right on hand. And because of technology, if you want to know something, like once I was writing about how Kate was in the slaughterhouse and she was slaughtering a lamb, and I just looked up a video and showed you how to do it. So it looks like I've done that like 100 times maybe when you read that part, but actually no, that was just a YouTube. And
well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and because of modern technology, you don't have to like go to the library anymore to look something up. You can probably find anything you need to know, and you don't have to allude to everything as an author. So it looks like you know about a lot more than probably, you know. I definitely allude, like I allude to the fact that I might be a French cook, but I'm not. I'd love to do that. So that's another thing. I put that in because Kate's really good at cooking and French cooking, because that would be cool. I'd love to learn French and I'd love to be able to cook French, but I can't. But I might do it one day. So yeah. So put in things you want to do, not just things you know.
I heard you one time mention to me that you got to a certain point in your writing where the characters just started writing themselves almost, and you didn't even need to like think about it, or you'd be like, well, I don't know what my characters are going to do next.
I come across that, especially if I want to pad out a little section. I'm like, but what would they do? Like, because you get to know them, and each character has a slightly different slant or characteristics. And I do sometimes think, I'd like you to do this, but I know that you, being who you are as a character, are not going to behave like that. So, you know, some of the guy characters that I'm writing, that comes across a lot, because it's not what I'd want to do necessarily, because I'm not like them. But when I think about the guys I know and how they would react or act, then I just write down what they would do rather than what I'd like them to do. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. That's really interesting. Oh, well, I was wondering, what do you do when you get stuck? Like, when you do find, not writer's block, but just when you find yourself, do you just, I heard you one time mention to me that you go for a walk and you think about it, or is it that,
yeah, it's really good to ponder things when you don't have a pen and aren't needing to write it down. So yeah, thinking over things as I'm going off to sleep. I think that's different to, like, if you ponder your life when you're going off to sleep, you'll probably stay awake because, you know, you've got to think about things. But if you ponder a story going off to sleep, often you just relax and then your mind's thinking about that in the night, but you're not. And then, you know, that helps. Yeah, there is a saying, sleep on it. And that, I think that is true. So that works. Yeah. And sometimes I just say to myself, oh, I need more here, or I want something else to happen here, and then it happens. But if I don't say that to myself, then I might not push for it.
Oh yeah, well, that's very cool to know. Well, I reckon I do get stuck because I do the going in order, but I think because you don't go in order, you don't get as stuck as often, or if you do, you'd be like, well, I can go back to this bit and see what I want to do over here, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that really helps. It helps because, yeah, you're not forced to be in one particular part. If one part's going slow and boring, then you can work on something quite fun and exciting. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's really cool to know. Oh, well, that's pretty interesting. Are there any scenes in your book that you found like hard to write, or they almost like made you cry while you were writing, or just that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I've cried writing some parts. Maybe more in the future. And I think use your moods, especially if you're female. And some people don't like to admit that hormones affect their emotions, but mine do. And, you know, if I want to write an angry scene, write it, you know, that time when you're feeling a bit more angry, or if you want to write a sad scene and you're feeling a bit sad, then go for it. And I hardly ever change it. Coming back when I'm in a different mood, if I read something that I've written in another mood, it still works. So yeah, use what you've got, and your moods are something that you can really use positively in a story, which is much better than using them in life, I think. Yeah,
that's that's some really good advice right there. Use your moods to write. I have never heard of that, but it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Songs too. Like if you
oh
get,
yes,
you know,
yes,
how
totally
you
get
get a spark of imagination from a song or something, then with that, you not necessarily playing at the time, but you get a spark, then write something from that point of view, and that can be awesome too. Yeah.
Oh, I totally get that. When I'm listening to songs, I have book characters that I've written in those scenes and like acting out the song as that story, even if it has nothing to do with the actual story about them. I input characters from shows or movies or people in real life that I know. Do you get that too with songs?
Yeah, and you know, in movies there's often music going in the background. So
oh yes,
you know, if that sort of influence in your writing, that's quite good too.
Oh well, that's pretty cool. We've probably got time for just a couple more questions, and then I'll let you go. Best case scenario, what do you want to happen from writing these books?
Well, best case scenario is that I'd really like my kids to have an appreciation of Māori. Oh wait, that's already happened. So I've already succeeded. Yay, job's done. No, seriously, I could not believe the impact of writing the story had on my own family and like my mum and friends that read the story too. So, you know, just making Māori culture seem a little bit more accessible and friendly, and because Māori are very friendly, and the possibility of a positive New Zealand, all those sorts of things, seeing the effect of that on my family and friends, it's great. And this is why, you know, that's another reason why everyone should write, because if you want to impact your world, that's a good way. Yeah. And I just really wanted to share the good experiences I've had whenever I've come into contact with Māori people, especially in their own settings. And I've done that through the story, but it is really it is a way to share. So I love that. Yeah. So I've already achieved it. Yeah. One. I mean, obviously it'd be great to become famous, but there'll be a lot of trouble with that as well.
Oh, and, yes, of course.
And in a way, like my stories are for us now at your age, but I'm also planning to write for you as you get older into themes, you know, so it's going to get adult, and some, you know, maybe even exploring some tragedy or something, you know, later on. And if you were writing a story for a publishing house, I don't think you're allowed to change age groups. Like if you start a story at a particular age group, then the publishing house likes you to keep it that, because it's dangerous, right? You don't want to have little kids reading adult stories. I don't want that either. But when you're self-publishing, like I'm doing, you can do whatever you like. And you can switch genres and all those sorts of things. You don't have to fit to a particular genre, particular age group, particular whatever. You know, the publishers are quite, I mean, awesome. They might help you to become rich, but they also are quite restrictive and want to keep you pinned in a box. Whereas with self-publishing, there's a lot more freedom. Like I think of, if someone came to the fireside, say we were all cave people, and someone came to the fireside and what was a storyteller, say they came from another village or something, they came and sat at your fire, you wouldn't sit there and say, wait, is this a horror movie? What age appropriate? Or something. So, you know, there's a lot of freedom there. So you wouldn't say that to the fireplace storyteller. And so it's nice for writers to have that freedom too if they want it. You just won't necessarily get into a publishing house, but that's okay. Not worried.
Well, actually, Roald Dahl wrote stories for little books and teenagers and adults. So that is one example.
And that's true. And I think they would have a way of making sure that, especially like his macabre short stories for adults, you wouldn't want them finding their way into the kindergarten
children's bookshelf.
So yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think that is true. You're right. There must be a way of making sure they stay.
It was probably because of his fame that he managed to be able to do that. It's probably one of the rare cases because of his
and they would have made sure the cover didn't look fun for children. yeah, no. So yeah, you need to be I do want to be careful about those sorts I don't want to cause hurt or influence people that aren't age appropriate to be influenced. So yeah, no, it is important, but it's also great to not be thinking about that as you write necessarily. Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. You also told me that some of your stories that you get ideas from, like some of them are stories from my grandfather's like childhood and that kind of thing. Like some of it stories of you and my uncle basically, but it's your characters instead. Do you take some of the story, like you said that before, that some of your stories is just your experience through life a little bit?
Yeah, a lot. And even now when new things happen to me, I'm like, oh, this would be good to put into a story somewhere. Like the occupation down the road, it's sort of like, I'm gonna put this in and feed it out a different, it will never look like it. It will be disguised and hidden. But everything, like I think, that poster that we've got in the hallway that says "Steal Like an Artist," if you're friends with a writer, look out, because nothing's off the table. Of course they will hide it and you won't recognize it once they've written it probably, but yeah, everything's up for grabs. Yeah. I can put anything in the story, and inspiration comes from everywhere.
That's really cool to know. Well, it was really cool to talk to you about this. I got to know you a little bit more, even though I know you're my mum, but it was cool to know a little bit
awesome.
more behind the story. And it was you did really well. It was pretty excellent.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed chatting. Good work, Gracie.
Yeah, good.
I think you're my favorite interviewer so far.
Thank you. You can tell that to the actual interviewer.
Yeah. Oh, true. You have to hit record or something.
Yeah, I'll stop recording now. So goodbye to the camera.
And save.
Yep, and save.